StarCrawlers is a grid-based dungeon crawler, or blobber as some like to call them for whatever reason. The game is set in a dystopian sci-fi universe, very similar to other cyberpunk settings. A corrupt dictator has recently been overthrown by a corrupt group of corporations that now act as the government, so we're already off to a great start. Your character is a crawler, a seedy mercenary who makes a living off doing shadow ops that are either dangerous, illegal, or both. And yes, in case you were already thinking it, this is almost a point-by-point ripoff of Shadowrun. It even has a matrix and deckers, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. When making your crawler, you get to pick between 7 different classes: Soldier, Force Psyker, Smuggler, Void Psyker, Hacker, Engineer, and Cyber Ninja. You also create a background for yourself that consists of your life as a child, adult, and whatever you were doing right before the game started. There's 3 options per section, and unique options for all classes. This gives you various stat bonuses and equipment to start, as well as unlocking some unique dialogue. There's a good bit of variety here, and shows the devs put a fair bit of thought into creating the background lore for the game. You and Luna, your sassy but loyal pilot, dock aboard Station Terminus 9, or ST9 for short. Though, in all honesty, they could be saying Styx, but since the dialogue is text boxes, I'm not quite sure. The main man around these parts is Sam Elliott with a robot arm.
Okay, dude. Have it your way.
His bar is going to be the central hub of your journey. Here you can find job postings, stash items and equipment, and hire other crawlers. Almost all the important story bits that happen in town take place here as well, so it's easily the most noteworthy part of the space station. Hiring other crawlers is cheap at first, but gets more expensive as your crew grows larger. You'll have to do a couple of missions on your own at first though, because you're basically dead broke to start the game. The town itself doesn't have much to it. There's 4 other locations you can visit besides Sam Elliott's bar: the hacking shop, the hospital, the shop, and the black market. The hacking shop lets you buy gear for your deck, which lets you jack into matrix points, something we'll touch on in a bit. The hospital is, well, a hospital. Drugs and med packs. That pretty much covers it. The shop is where you can buy and sell equipment, upgrade equipment you find, and use the auto bench to make special pieces of equipment that are composed of different items you find on your journey. Think of them as an item set from Diablo or something like that. Except instead of finding several pieces of gear for a set bonus, you find several different items to combine into one piece of gear. They are usually pretty damn good, but the components are super rare and really random as far as which drop. So while it's worth your time to look for them, I wouldn't stress about it if you can't find all of them. There are plenty of other good accessories you'll be able to use. The black market is really the most interesting one. Here you can trade a special currency called Eon Cubes for rare and unique pieces of gear. You find these all throughout the levels you explore in the game, and higher difficulty missions usually have more of them lying around. You can also auction off items that you appropriated throughout the course of your journeys. This will of course make some people mad, specifically the people whose stuff you stole. But they can't exactly call your manager and have you fired, now can they? Although they can send assassins, but we'll get to that. Also, you can gamble. You do this by buying loot boxes, for lack of a better term, that give you random gear. This is probably the least interesting option though, as you will be swimming in gear from your crawls, so yeah, nothing really worth talking about here, honestly. The art style is interesting. Most games in this type of world lean really heavily on the dirty and gritty look. which is understandable given the seedy setting. But StarCrawlers injects a little more of the whimsical high fantasy aesthetic into their game's design, and it's surprising they did this without the styles clashing. It results in something that feels a little more like Guardians of the Galaxy than Blade Runner, despite the subject matter getting a little dark sometimes. The level design is okay, but there's definitely a stark difference between the story mission levels and the procedurally generated side mission levels. As one would expect, areas tend to repeat themselves, and after about 15 or so side missions, you really just start zoning out and not paying attention anymore. I can't really rag on them too much though. This is an indie studio creating their first game that was funded over Kickstarter after all, so it would be pretty rude to hold them to a AAA standard. And I did play the game for around 20 hours before it really started to stick out, which isn't so bad I guess. The music is fantastic though. Apparently it was composed by the same guy who did the music for FTL, which I never played personally but have heard some good things about. But I mean, just listen to this. The missions are the bread and butter of StarCrawlers, so let's talk about those. They're broken up between story missions and side missions. As I said above, the side missions are procedurally generated, so you can literally play them forever. The story missions are finite, thankfully, and always sit at the top of Sam's board. Those corporations who took over the government are fighting for power against other groups who aren't so happy with their leadership. And turns out both sides are hiring crawlers like you to dig up dirt and steal secrets on one another. There's also a third group who just basically wants to watch the world burn, and they get into the action too. When you take a mission for one entity, you'll inevitably piss off another. There's usually no avoiding it. Make a group mad enough by doing enough crawls they don't approve of, and you can expect more assassins. People will really like their assassins in this game. Get on the good side of a group, and they will reward you with items to assist you during crawls. These items are okay, but don't seem to be anything super impactful, at least in my experience with the game. The benefit of just stealing all the good stuff to sell definitely seems to outweigh the benefit of having a group on your side. So honestly, I would just do that. Live for the present, man. Life is meaningless. So, when you select a mission, you pick what team combination you want to take, and then you're off. The map is grid-based, so you can only move up, down, right, and left. Enemies appear on the map and move as you do, so you get an idea of what you're about to face before being thrusted into combat. There's also traps, security cameras, and various other hazards sprinkled throughout the level you need to deal with. These can be annoying at times, because it doesn't feel like they gel all that well with the blocky movement. Pressure plates are the worst offenders, because there will be some rooms that you can't enter without triggering one. The worst thing by far is when they summon in new mobs of enemies. There's nothing like having 3 mobs appear in a room because 2 spawned in from a pressure plate, then having your hacker fail at cutting the electricity to these, which results in 2 more spawning on your way out. Fighting 5 mobs for just 1 used coffee cup? Sounds like a great deal to me. Exploring the map is highly encouraged though. due to the various loot and weapons you can discover along the way. Gear and loot can be sold at the shop for credits, and missions pay out pretty well, especially if you pick the higher difficulty ones. This will be your main source of income. I'm not sure if the gear you get is also procedurally generated, but there's a lot of it. Now let's talk about combat. Combat in StarCrawlers is turn-based. Every ability you use, including basic attacks, costs a certain amount of time units. The cost of an ability's time indicates how long before that character will be able to act again. You can keep track of this with a timeline at the top of your screen. Each class has 3 trees you can pick from for abilities. Soldiers are thick boys who are very tanky and draw aggro from enemy mobs. Smugglers are gunslinging Han Solos that have decent DPS and very strong crowd control. Force Psychers can tank as well as put barriers up to protect your party members from enemy attacks. They can be built as DPS, but I don't feel this is the role they're best suited for personally. Void Psychers have amazing DPS, and can also do this. Yeah, Void Psychers are fun. Engineers can summon drones that do some good damage and are pretty tough to take down, but I feel this is the weakest class overall. Cyber Ninjas are assassins that can do some devastating DPS, especially to single targets, and offer okay crowd control options. And last, but certainly not least, Hackers, which are arguably the best class in the game. Imagine a character that can give AIDS and coronavirus to computers and people before making the virus explode inside of them. Couple this with the huge buff it gives you in exploration due to their ability to hack into security systems to potentially shut them down, and you have the only class I would consider an auto-include for every mission. If you choose not to bring a hacker with you for whatever reason, then your best method of dealing with the level's security lies in data jacking into the mainframe and shutting it down. This takes you into a virtual world where you battle against the various programs that protect the mainframe from you. You battle them using programs you have installed in your deck, which you either buy from the hack shop for a pretty high premium or find inside of the data matrix as you dig around in it. The latter method is much more economically efficient, but it's kind of a chicken and the egg deal. If you want good enough programs to actually do some damage and progress further into a data matrix, you probably have to buy a couple starting off despite the highish prices. Keeping yourself upgraded will give you an upper hand in fights, allowing you to progress through and find better programs and mods for your deck. I would still argue you're just better off bringing a hacker, because quite frankly I find the fights in the data matrix kind of dull. And if you rely on this, you'll be spending a lot of time slogging through a portion of the game that honestly isn't very fun. Bear in mind though, I'm also someone who hated the data matrix in the Shadowrun games as well, so maybe I just have a personal vendetta against these type of missions. The story starts with you getting hired to investigate the mysterious disappearance of several ship crews, and without giving too many spoilers, it ends up being a fun mashup of all kinds of cyberpunk tropes. Rogue AI, corporations doing evil things because corporations, weird interdimensional shit. It's a fucking riot. The way it's all jammed together gives me an awesome B-movie vibe, but it can get a little ridiculous at times. Overall, this is a fun game. I would definitely recommend it to anyone who is a fan of turn-based RPGs and dungeon crawlers. The combat will keep you intrigued for a while, and there's enough to explore that you won't get bored with the game even when it's a bit repetitive. I'm on about 60 hours playtime and still going. I definitely think it's worth the $5 I paid for it. 7 out of 10. I'm hoping to get my next video out before the end of the month. There's a lot coming up though, including Final Fantasy VII, Resident Evil 3, and Doom. It's very unlikely I'll cover all three on release, and Final Fantasy is definitely getting the priority. I mean, I did a video on the demo for God's sake. Hit that subscribe button so you can be updated whenever something new is posted. And toss a like to this video if you're feeling generous. Also, if you guys have any suggestions for games I should check out, feel free to leave them in the comments. Thanks for watching and have a great day.